I will never back down in defense of the conservative values that make America exceptional. And that's why I'm announcing my exploratory committee for President of the United States. I will defend the Judeo-Christian foundation our nation is built on and protect our religious liberty. I will stand up to communist China and restore opportunities for hard-working Americans to thrive and prosper. I will fight to give every parent a choice in education so their children have a better chance in life. I will defend our borders and our neighborhood streets, and I will protect our most fundamental right, the right to life itself.
We have possibly a new challenger. Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, is opening his exploratory committee. It's an announcement style video, but it's just the exploratory committee where he's checking out and testing the waters to see if Republicans are buying what he's looking to sell. So as he's trying to get them to jump on board, these Republican voters, what he's then doing is going along the, I guess political advisors told him to do this, to go with the, you know what, I'm the black candidate, and all these people with these oppression talks and lack of opportunity talks and racism talks, they don't know what's going on. Watch.
They're promoting victimhood instead of personal responsibility, and they're indoctrinating our children to believe we live in an evil country. And all too often, when they get called out for their failures, they weaponize race to divide us, to hold on to their power. When I fought back against their liberal agenda, they called me a prop, a token, because I disrupt their narrative. I threaten their control. They know the truth of my life disproves their lies. I know America is a land of opportunity, not a land of oppression. I know it because I've lived it. That's why it pains my soul to see the Biden liberals attacking every rung of the ladder that helped me climb.
This is where Tim Scott frustrates me. He frustrates me to no end with this part. Because I've said this before, and I think I caught a little bit of flack for it. I don't hate Tim Scott. I think he has an opportunity in some realms, definitely not in the Republican Party as far as running for president, but he has an opportunity to be a voice that is kind of unique, and he keeps missing it. For some reason, he's going with the Herman Cain and Ben Carson direction when it comes to running for president as a Republican, which is, I'm the black candidate, and I'm here to tell everyone that all these issues that going on with race and bias in our country are non-existent. I'm a black guy, and you should listen to me because I'm a black guy, and I'm going to dispel all that. I'm these white Republicans' best friend. You don't have to do that. We've already seen that over and over and over again. And as a matter of fact, as he's talking about how all that is BS, what these libs keep talking about, there's this guy who looks a lot like Tim Scott, and he's not a lib, but he said some of those things. Watch.
In the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times by law enforcement officers. Not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 times in 1 year as an elected official. For those who don't know, there are a few ways to identify a member of Congress or Senate. Well, typically when you've been here for a couple of years, the law enforcement officers get to know your face and they just identify you by face. But if that doesn't happen and you have a badge, a license that you can show them, shows that you're a senator, or this really cool pen. I oftentimes say that the House pen is larger because our egos are bigger, so we need a smaller pen. So it's easy to identify a U.S. senator by our pen. I recall walking into an office building just last year after being here for 5 years on the Capitol. And the officer looked at me with a little attitude and said, "The pen, I know. You, I don't. Show me your ID." I'll tell you, I was thinking to myself, either he thinks I'm committing a crime impersonating a member of Congress, or what?
Or what, Tim? I think what he's hinting at is there's some racial biases with our policing systems. Even if you're a damn senator, a black senator, a Republican senator, where you'll still get profiled and said, I don't know you, boy. What is it that you're doing around here? And he's retelling the story because there was a lot of racial tension going on and people were talking about these murders of these black folks at the hands of police officers. And maybe there's some truth to it. For some reason, he's abandoned that truth of his, a part of his life. In fact, there's more that he said. This is even from this whole speech and his story behind it. I'm going to try not to stay on this too long because I could go on Tim Scott for a very long time. But during his speech, Scott also shared a story of a former staffer of his who drove a Chrysler 300. I'm not sure if you guys are car people, but a Chrysler 300 is generally kind of a luxury car. A Chrysler 300, a nice car without any question, but not a Ferrari is what he said. The staffer wound up selling that car out of frustration after being pulled over too often in Washington, D.C. for absolutely no reason other than driving a nice car. He told a similar story of his brother, Tim Scott's brother, a command sergeant major in the U.S. Army who was pulled over by an officer suspicious that the car Scott's brother was driving was stolen because it was a damn Volvo. And he said this last part. I simply ask you this. Recognize that just because you do not feel the pain, the anguish of another, does not mean it doesn't exist. Tim Scott said that. To ignore their struggles, our struggles, does not make them disappear. It will simply leave you blind and the American family very vulnerable. But now, for some reason, it's all those lefties that are talking about this inequality and lack of opportunity and oppression. You know what? I'm a black senator, and you know what? All that is BS. Unless I say something different a couple of years ago from that. I want to show you guys one more thing, Yaz. I know there's a lot to say, but this is the back end of that, his storytelling. And I want to juxtapose that with what he's saying in this announcement video and see if these are two different people.
Well, I'll tell you that later that evening, I received a phone call from his supervisor apologizing for the behavior. Mr. President, that is at least the third phone call that I've received from a supervisor or the chief of police since I've been in the Senate. So while I thank God I have not endured bodily harm, I have, however, felt the pressure applied by the scales of justice when they are slanted. They're promoting victimhood instead of personal responsibility, and they're indoctrinating our children to believe we live in an evil country. And all too often, when they get called out for their failures, they weaponize race to divide us.
Who's doing that? What's your thoughts here, Yaz?
Oh my God, so many thoughts. Something that I've noticed about, I don't know what to call them, Republicans of color, that's a really awkward term, but if you have a better one, let me know. But one thing I've noticed about them is the way that they try to downplay the impact that race has had in their own lives. And I presume the reason they do this is to shield to these mostly white Republicans and to these mostly white Republican donors as a way to say, like, oh, I'm basically just one of you. Just because you're a Republican doesn't mean that you can't and won't be racially profiled, because as much as you try to downplay who you are and what you look like, you still are who you are. And also, anyone who tries to downplay who they are to appease some other outside group seems either insecure or opportunistic to me, and you can't trust people like that. And then he just keeps talking about, Joe Biden and the radical left. Mm-hmm. And if there is a radical left, Joe Biden is far from it, right? He's not part of it, right? It's just a thing to say that you can use to scare ignorant people. And it's a thing you say when you've got nothing else to say. And I swear politics these days are just a matter of repeating the same catchphrases over and over again. There's nothing original or remarkable about anything that Scott has said in any of these clips. And as much as he likes to pretend that he's not a token for the Republican Party, that seems like it might be the only thing he has going for him right now. It's really the only somewhat distinguishable factor, at least from what I can discern.
Well, I mean, he's pushing it himself. And again, maybe it's him, maybe it's a political advisor, but to say, you're the black Republican potentially going to run for president, so you have to be the one that carries the water and dispels all the things the minorities say, so it can make white Republican voters feel more comfortable with you. It's the Carson Kane approach, and look where that got them. One last part, because I don't even like calling him a token, because I think he probably has a decent truth about his own life without parroting all the rest of this BS that might get him somewhere. But since we're talking about the way Republicans might see him, or even this black person running for president here, let's go to the last side here, because Matt Schlapp was asked about what it is with Tim Scott and his potential to maybe lead this race a little bit. And what he said is very telling for what white Republicans think of their black Republicans that could be running for office.
The other thing that's interesting is running, obviously, as a very unique person. He's a black Republican, a conservative in the United States Senate. You know, the Republican Party has honored each African American who decided to run for president by having them lead in the polls. So don't be surprised if Tim Scott kind of pops here.
Schlapp literally thought that was a nice flex. Now, what the Republican Party has done is they've honored African American candidates by allowing them to lead in the polls for a minute or two. And after they lead in the polls for a minute or two, which Ben Carson did, which Herman Cain did, afterwards, then they shove along to the side, because that's the limit of what black Republicans can do for us in this party. Use you so that we can promote ourselves and say we're not as racist and exclusionary as we are, and then shove your ass to the side and never think about you again. Don't fall for it, Tim. Maybe you already did.